This is the Illinois Nutrient Loss Reduction Podcast, Episode 21, Illinois Central College's System Approach to Improving Water Quality. I'm U of I Extension's Todd Gleason. Pete Fundell has been putting together a system approach to improving water quality coming off of farm fields located on the ICC campus overlooking the Illinois River near Peoria. Can you tell me just a bit about this approach?
Yeah, well, basically, we have about 50 tillable acres here on the ICC campus, and several years ago, we started looking at cover crops just for kind of, purposes of soil health and water quality, and then that kind of eventually snowballed into kind of an expanded program, kind of really focused in on the nutrient loss reduction strategy and water quality, where the first phase was we did a paired field study, 2 fields side by side with separate independent tile lines. One's farmed conventionally, tillage, corn and soybeans. The other's no-till, corn and soybeans with cover crops every year. And then we analyze all the tile water flowing out of those 2 fields for nutrient loads on concentration. That's been going for about 5 years. A couple of years later, we added a bioreactor so that all the water after it leaves those 2 fields then flows through a bioreactor. And again, we have water sampling to tell how good of a job a bioreactor can do at removing nitrates from the tile water. And then the next phase of that project was just here in July. We built a 1-acre wetland on our campus that actually drains almost all of the water off the 50 acres of the agricultural fields. So all the tile water will basically flow through a 1-acre wetland. And again, this spring then we'll put water monitoring stations on the inlet and the outflow of the wetland, again, to be able to monitor the effectiveness of wetlands at removing nutrients in the tile water.
So tell me about the difference between the 2 farms. You've had that running for 5 years, which is plenty long enough to collect the data to get a good idea.
Correct. I mean, obviously, year in, year out, there's variances depending on weather and rainfall, et cetera. But on average, basically, when you move to a system where you're having cover crops in the field, that's about a 40% reduction in nitrates getting to the tile line. That our data tended to show that happened from the very first year the cover crops were planted. So I think there's a big advantage of having a cover crop in a field and being able to capture all that leftover nitrogen that might be in the field or that's being converted by the microbes in the soil after you're done with harvest, et cetera. Being able to put that nitrogen back into an organic form in a plant rather than it getting to the tile lines.
You also have a wood chip bioreactor in the system that's acting as a filter. Can you tell me how it's been working?
Yes, I mean, definitely the bioreactor does a good job at cleaning up the water that flows through the bioreactor. I'd say one of the limiting factors, though, of a bioreactor is during the peak rain events, or I should say high rain, high flow events, where you get lots of rainfall at a short amount of time, a lot of the water bypasses the reactor because it just can't handle that much water. So in the grand scheme of things, the total amount of water that gets cleaned by the bioreactor is only about 15% roughly of the amount of water that actually flows out of those 2 fields. But that 15% is very effectively cleaned. But again, it's a small fraction of the total load of the water coming out of the field just because of the high flow events.
This wood chip bioreactor is the second filter in the system beyond the cover crops on one of the fields.
Correct.
And then there is a third element. You're in the midst of putting together a constructed wetland.
Exactly. That's why, it's kind of unique that we have them all in the same system so we can kind of analyze the different loadings at different stages. But the point of the wetland is obviously it's at the very end of the 12-inch tile that drains pretty much the entire 50 acres. So we're hoping to be able to obviously capture all that all the nutrients coming out of the tile water, see what the wetland can do with that. The wetland was designed by the Wetlands Initiative, and after they designed it, the designs went through the NRCS to make sure they were approved by their practices as well. So it's sized accordingly where it should be able to filter out pretty much most of the nutrient load coming off the 50 acres. And it is a little bit different than a typical wetland you might see out in a farmer's field or in a farmer's, because it's on a main road here on our campus. So it was kind of aesthetically designed. So it's not just really a rectangle. It's kind of a flowing, meandering, kind of a big horseshoe-shaped wetland. So it has some aesthetic value to it. It's got some deeper pockets and some islands in it. So it's kind of, again, it's designed to look nice, but also effectively, hopefully, clean all the tile water as well.
How do you incorporate this into the agricultural curriculum there at ICC?
Oh, absolutely. We incorporate all the different trials we do on the tillable acres and the wetland projects. It all gets incorporated into many of the different ag classes we do, from soils to soil fertility to just a host of the different courses. We try to get the students involved in looking at the research data and understanding why we do certain practices and their effects on the environment and all that kind of stuff. We incorporate that very much into the coursework.
If people want to see this, they can just drop by the ICC campus there at the top of the bluff near Peoria?
Correct. Yeah, the wetland's very much on one of the main drags that you can see it as you drive by. Right now, it actually is just planted to grass and oats because the wetland plants wouldn't have survived the winter if we'd have planted them yet. So right now, it's just a temporary planting. Next spring, late spring, early summer, we'll plant all the wetland plants into it, and then we'll divert all the water from the main to go through the wetland. So this year you won't, the rest of this year you won't see much yet. Next year is where you should see the really big change and kind of the progression of the wetland plants growing in over the next couple of years after that.
Am I right that the cover crops seem to be the most effective tool for you to use to control nutrient loss?
Oh, definitely. The wetland, as far as the effect on your soil, effect on water quality, cover crops, I think are the easiest and probably least expensive of any of the practices you can do, and seem to have one of the bigger effects on the nutrient loading on the tiles. So yeah, I think it's a great practice to, and we've got lots of data on cover crops for different reasons, different plots. We've been doing that for many more years even than the kind of the water quality work.
Pete Fondell is with Illinois Central College. You can drop by the ICC campus near Peoria if you'd like to see the constructed wetland. In fact, Fondell says the woodchip bioreactor is also open, meaning they've left the top of it uncovered. Normally, those are closed systems, so you can see the wood chips and how they degrade over time and what the construction looks like right there at Illinois Central College. I'm University of Illinois Extension's Todd Gleason.